a sewing vlog, as it seems happens sometimes. It's kind of been a crazy time, so how is everyone doing? I hope everyone's staying healthy and safe and all that, because it's a weird time, and you know, it really took me a while to start sewing a project during this time, because I kind of just went into survival mode, and it's hard to create when you're just trying to survive. So if you saw my Instagram post a while back now, almost a month ago, you know my sewing plans changed slightly drastically, because I was winging my next project that I already had fabric for and was literally about to start cutting out that day that I posted it, was my formal dress, and then it got canceled because of everything going on. So I didn't really know what else to sew, so I went to my fabric stash, because I'm not going to the fabric store here, and I found some pretty white linen, and I decided to make a chemise, an 1860s chemise, because the one that I have that I made a long time ago, it's pretty nasty and has sweat stains all over it from reenacting down south. So I decided to go ahead and make it myself a new 1860s chemise that will work it'll work for like 1850s and maybe 1840s if I fudge it really good. But yeah, so it's very much a mid-Victorian chemise. And since I have a lot of time, because my school was canceled for, like, completely canceled for 2 weeks, while they sorted out what to do, I decided I was going to hand sew it, because that seemed like a good idea. Because I like hand sewing, I just don't normally have time to do it, because hand sewing is way more time consuming than machine sewing. So I decided to hand stitch it, which was challenging in its own way, because I haven't, usually if I do hand stitching on things, I don't think I've ever completely hand sewn like a garment before. I usually do like a mixture of hand stitching and machine stitching. And if you don't have time to hand sew everything, but you still want to participate in a hobby, I don't think that you not having time to hand sew everything should keep you away from it. Because if I couldn't machine sew my things, I wouldn't have like any outfits. I might have one, and creating things brings me joy, and therefore I'm going to do it. So that is my personal take on that. But that being said, I think there's beauty in hand stitching as well as machine sewing, and I had to look up a lot of things while I was doing a lot of hand stitching that we'll get into a little later, because I'll show you what I did. Because there are certain stitches you use for certain parts of the garment, and then certain ways of doing everything. It's not just one straight stitch. So we'll talk about that more later. But the first thing I did, of course, was cut out the pattern, and I got myself to do that. So that was a good step one, is getting myself to cut out the pattern. I used a period impressions pattern. It worked really, really well. I liked it a lot. I was thinking about doing a video about some of my favorite historical pattern companies. So if you are interested in that, tell me that you are interested in the comments, and I will work on a video about that. But yes, so cutting out period impressions pattern, step one. Step two was cutting out the fabric. And I use this kind of white linen. I'm pretty sure it's linen. Like I said, it's from my fabric stash, and I don't label things. So I it feels nice, and I do a lot of things by feel. I can just like feel a fabric, and I'm like, yes, this would be good for the mid-Victorian era, or no, this doesn't feel right, or it's passable. Because sometimes things don't have to be 100% authentic, and that's okay. But sometimes they do need to be 100% authentic, and that is also okay. So, depends on what event you're going to and what your purposes of making these things are. So, I did that. And then I started to stitch. And I got my needle and my thread, and I threaded the needle, and then I decided we're going to start with the yoke that goes around your shoulders. That's a pretty good start to this, I think. I began by sewing the outer shoulder band to its lining. I opted not to do a drawstring option. I sewed them together using a running stitch, or a straight stitch, as it's sometimes called, which is probably the most basic stitch in hand sewing. The stitches worked by passing the needle in and out of the fabric from one side to the other, and then back again. I draped it over my shoulders to make sure it would fit, and I was quite pleased. Something I learned after getting into historical costuming is that I have sloped shoulders, which seemed to be incredibly popular during the 19th century. It's depicted in a lot of paintings, especially during the 1830s. Like, just look at that slope. Anywho, I find it to be incredibly helpful to keep this in mind while working on something like this chemise, because it sits on or just below the shoulder. So to know if you have like normal shoulders or like broad shoulders or sloped shoulders, it's helpful to keep that in mind when making something like this. It was then time to make the little slit in the front panel of the chemise. I made nice little tiny hems on either side of that slit, and I sewed them down using a running stitch. The pattern then said to make a 5/8 pleat, which brings the right side over the left front edge, but here I accidentally pleated the left over the right, so I had to seam rip it and fold it over the right way, which I did later. But of course, those of you who are watching the video right now, it does look like I put the right over the left like I'm supposed to do, and for me staring at the garment, that's also what I thought, but then I put it on and I realized it was wrong. Anywho, this is the wrong way that I was doing it, but it still gives you an idea of how I did it. Just pretend it's the mirror image. After that, I mark the pleats on the front of the chemise and I pin them in place. For the back, I decided not to do pleats, and I did a gather in the center back. I then sewed the front of the shoulder band to the chemise front and back panels with a running stitch. Once I was done, I pressed the neckband flat. I tried it on just to make sure it was fitting properly and was, again, very pleased with the progress. It was then time to work on the sleeve. I did a narrow rolled hem on the short edge of the sleeve piece. To sew this rolled hem in place, I used a hem stitch that I learned how to do from a video by Burnley and Towbridge. I will be linking that down in the description box below if you would like to learn more about that. It's very informational and very helpful. Good video. But I will summarize it here very quickly. So basically, you prick as little of the top fabric as possible while still securing the stitch, and then you take it from the back into the hem, and then you work it from the back. Again, if you want more detail, go see the link by Burnley and Towbridge once you are done with this video. I then gathered the tops of the sleeves. I later realized that I gathered these sleeves far too tightly, and I went back and I seam ripped them and I gathered them less. But I did it the same way as I did it here. Just imagine it with less gathers, because that's how it's going to be when it's done. After gathering the sleeves, I set the sleeves into the chemise. But the way that this pattern called for the sleeves to be set was in two parts. First, you were to just sew the top gathered part of the sleeve to the chemise, and then you were to sew up the chemise side seam and then out the bottom of the sleeve. So I sewed the sleeve in these two parts. I sewed in the top of the sleeve, and then I sewed up the side seam and out the bottom of the sleeve using a running stitch. Here is my furry little sewing helper who is absolutely loving having me home so much. She also really loves to watch me hand sew. She doesn't really care about watching the machine, like the sewing machine. Only she really loves watching hand stitches. This is not the first time she's done this. I believe it's when I was sewing the Watteau, yes, the pleats. And my robot La France she also did the same thing. She's adorable, and I love her, and she's just so cute and so helpful. I really think it has something to do with the thread, because she loves to play with string. But she never tries to bat or play with the thread, so I think she knows that this isn't a play toy. But she just really likes to watch it. So after sewing the side seams, I finish it off nicely by doing a flat felled seam. I don't normally take the time to finish off my garments in the most proper of ways, but like I said, I had a lot of time on my hands, so I decided to make this really nice. To make a flat felled seam, you cut one side of the seam allowance to about 1/4 of an inch, and then you fold over the longer seam allowance, and you fold the longer over the shorter, and then you stitch it flat. I then finished off the shoulder band. To do this, I turned the raw edge of the inside of the band under, and then I whip stitched over the seam allowance to finish it. A whip stitch is when you sew through both layers of fabric, but you start each stitch from the same side, and you generally sew very close to the edge of the fabric. I then hemmed the bottom of the chemise. I did a double fold hem, and I used a hem stitch to sew it down, the same as the one I used above that I learned from Burnley and Towbridge. Lastly, I had to sew on a button and make a buttonhole. So a buttonhole is recommended to be about 1/8 of an inch longer or larger than the button. Here I am measuring that out, marking the measurement onto the fabric, and then making the cut. To make the cut, I folded the fabric in half over the line I wanted to cut, so then I can snip the middle part, and then from the middle of the buttonhole I can snip out the edges. I finished off the buttonhole by hand using the fabulous video by Bernadette Banner about, well, making buttonholes. I will link that video below as well if you would like more detailed explanation. But in a nutshell, you start on the inside of the buttonhole, then you stick the needle halfway through, you then bring the tail of the thread over the needle and pull that needle the rest of the way through, and this makes a little knot on the inside of your buttonhole to hold everything together. Again, if you would like a more detailed explanation, go see the fabulous video by Bernadette Banner, linked below. Once the buttonhole was done, I placed the button and I sewed it down. And then finally, it was done. I think hand sewing is a really wonderful skill, and I think I might even use it more and more in the future because I liked it more than I thought I did. And it was really helpful during this time to just sit and work on something with my hands that was very slow and methodical and very soothing in a way, which I enjoyed. But I'm incredibly proud of this work that I did here on this chemise, and I can't wait to wear it. Hopefully not all reenacting events are going to be cancelled. Of course, we'll have to see what we can do safely, because safety is the #1 priority. But yes, or if I can't wear it to an event, I'm just going to wear it around my house, so it'll be fine. Alright, y'all. Thank you so much for watching. This has been a Historical Belle production. If you liked it, I do a lot of these type of things, so hit that like and subscribe button. And yeah, I think that's it. I have some more content coming out in the next couple weeks, so stay tuned. Alright, thanks. Bye.